All right, welcome to step one of building a budget, and that is documenting your income. We're going to go through this pretty quick with lots of examples, so feel free to watch the video a few times if you need to. But I think you'll find it's not all that daunting. So let's get started. So, what is included in your budget income? Well, first of all, if you're working, if you're of working age, then simple things like the salary you're paid, the hourly wage you're paid, any tips, commissions, any really dependable earnings that you get from a side job or from your regular job. All those things need to be documented in your budget. If you're retired, then you have things like pensions. You have withdrawals from a 401k or an IRA or an annuity or many other types of retirement accounts. And you have Social Security. If you are dependent on welfare programs or charity or something of that nature, then you want to document any cash or cash equivalent as income. So, for example, the food stamps program. It's a program that makes sure people can eat, and so they have a certain allotment of money that they can spend on food in order to survive. So that's a cash equivalent. Now you still pinned down to what you can spend that money on, but nevertheless it is your money to spend. Whereas some other benefits such as reduced housing costs, something like that, that's nothing that you ever see. It's a subsidy that takes place before you even touch it. And so it is not cash or the equivalent of cash that ever gets in your hands to use. So these are just a few examples of things that will end up in your income. It's important to be clear about what is not included in your income. Number one, and we'll hit this in our few examples, we don't want to include unreliable sources of income. So if you have a chance to make a $500 bonus if you're the employee of the month throughout the year, and you're one of 300 employees, you probably don't want to plan on in your budget winning that award every month or maybe even once in the entire year, even if you're one of the best. The simple chances of getting that income and therefore relying on it to set your budget, the chances are kind of small. So if you win it, great. It's a special surprise and a little more money to spend and have fun with or save. But you don't want to depend on it in your budget. Second is long-term investments. So for example, if you have a 401k and that 401k is gaining value each year, we don't put that in our budget. It's because that's not something you're going to spend this year. That's a long-term investment that you don't intend to touch. Now there are professionals where their entire livelihood is in making stock trades and investments and things of that nature. So if that's the case, then you'll have to include it in your income because that's your whole job. But generally speaking, any long-term investment, that's something that's off to the side that we're letting be and we're letting grow. It's not something we're depending on for our annual budget. Employment benefits that are not available for you to spend. So lots of people do 401k matches for retirement. So if I put in 5%, the company will put another 2% on top, something like that. Well, again, it kind of goes back to that long-term investment. A match is not something that I can touch and spend today if I need it. Therefore, it's not something I'm going to depend on in my income. An insurance subsidy. So maybe insurance for your family costs $1,000 a month, and your employer subsidizes that by $800. So you only end up paying $200 of that $1,000. Well, again, it's great that they're doing that, but it's never money that you see. If you decide not to use the insurance, it's not like they're going to give you $800 to your paycheck. Maybe they will, but in most cases, they probably won't. So it's not something we depend on setting the annual budget. And then other benefits like a car lease or many other fringe benefits that go with employment of certain types. So lastly, non-cash or cash equivalent benefits. So let's say you mow your neighbor's lawn each week. In exchange, they make you dinner. Well, that's wonderful. It is a great benefit, and you're probably doing it just to be nice. But nevertheless, the benefit is not something you can go spend on something else. So we don't include it in our budget. So let's take a look at a few examples to try to drive home the point of what to include and what not to include. So let's start with something nice and simple. In this example, Sue earns $52,000 a year in salary. She's paid biweekly. Her income is just a simple $2,000 paycheck, 26 times a year. It's about as simple as it gets. Let's take a look at another one. John's a part-time waiter, earns $5 an hour plus tips, and is paid bi-weekly as well. Over the last 3 months, he's worked 32 hours and earned $400 a week in tips. Working 32 hours a week is consistent, but recently he's picked up some evening shifts that aren't quite so normal, so he's gotten more tips. So in this case, we take that $5 an hour times 32 hours, and we multiply it times 2, because he's paid every 2 weeks. So really we've got 64 hours times $5. We get $320, paid 26 times a year. Now that's the hourly earnings, and that one's pretty consistent. That's been going on for a while, and John feels pretty good about that. The tips, however, making $400 a week, well, that's been a little higher than normal. So rather than budget for $400 a week and be in a tough situation if he doesn't bring that in, he's going to budget for $300 a week. It's a little more reasonable, a little more conservative, something to depend on. And because we counted on those tips weekly instead of bi-weekly, we've got 52 times a year instead of 26. Let's hit another one. So Mary sells medical equipment. She's got a $30,000 salary paid monthly, but a lot of her income is from commissions. She's been on the job for a few years, and she's averaging about $1,425 with a low of $450 and a high of $3,800 in her monthly commissions. Annually, she earned $19,500 in commissions in her best year and $14,000 in her worst. So this example goes to the idea that really what you budget your income on things that are unstable just depends on how risky you think it is. So that $30,000 salary is pretty steady. We can probably depend on that. So we break it down to $2,500 a month, 12 times a year. The commission, it's a little tougher. She may decide to just average it out and do what I've done here in the example to about $14,000 a year with that $1,166 a month. She may decide that she thinks her year's looking pretty bright, and so maybe $1,300-$1,400 a month is not crazy. She may decide that next year's not looking so good, or maybe she just wants to be a little more conservative, so she's only going to budget for $750 or $800. This is where it's really about the risk you want to take. To me, I think it's best to be conservative, so I'd stick with at least an average or maybe even below average to make sure I was going to be okay in my budget. Worst case, you've got more money than you thought, and that's a good problem to have. Let's hit another one. Bill makes $15 an hour driving a truck, averages 50 hours a week. Jill is an office assistant making $36,000 a year. So here we just took two incomes and we combined them. So if you've got a family income with more than one person working, the same rules apply. Just do the same things and then add the separate lines for each person's income. So you've got the $1,200 a year for the hourly wage, and then you've got the overtime, which may or may not always be there. So in this case, we took the 40 hours a week at $15 an hour, did that bi-weekly, so 26 times a year, and we took the overtime and we reduced it by a little bit, just because overtime you can't always depend on. So again, take the conservative route, knock it down a little bit. Worst case, you're pleasantly surprised and you've got a little bit more money to spend than you thought. And then Jill's is easy, $3,000 a year times 12. Let's hit one more. Bob and Beth are retired. They receive $1,250 a month from Social Security and $650 from their annuity. In addition, they withdraw $975 per month from their retirement account in order to live the lifestyle they've budgeted. So we just simply line them up. So these are just a few examples that I made up off the top of my head for different types of income and different types of situations that a person or a family may draw that income from. You can take it as far as you want. There are lots of people out there that make some money each year selling some things on Craigslist or eBay or any number of sites. There are lots of people that have little side jobs they make a little money on. So you decide. You decide if that's something dependable enough to include in your income, or if that's something that you want to keep doing on the side, but for the sake of planning out your finances, it'd be the safer bet just to leave that off the table and only plan on the income from your main job that you know you can depend on. So with that, dig through your bank statements, dig through your pay stubs, take a look at the last few years, what income you've earned, and start filling out this income section of what you think you can depend on going forward for your year's budget. After you do that, you'll be done with step one, and it's time to move on. We'll see you then.